The second time she handed it back, he offered her $10,000. She said no. That was the moment Theodore Vance, whose net worth the previous quarter had been listed by Forbes at $1 billion, who had built a commercial construction empire from a 2-truck operation in Birmingham to a firm with contracts in 11 states, who had in the course of a long and largely successful life almost never been told no by anyone who didn't subsequently regret it, felt, for the first time in recent memory, genuinely confused. Not about the wallet, about her. She was standing in the same spot she'd stood 3 weeks earlier, the corner of the Vance Group's lobby, polished granite floors, brass elevator doors, the kind of entrance hall that announces wealth without trying to, which is the most expensive kind of announcement. She wore the same kind of clothes she'd worn the first time. Clean, simple, unremarkable. She looked like someone who cleaned other people's buildings, which she did. She looked at him across the width of that lobby and held out the wallet. He took it. Of course he took it. It had $12,000 in cash and a platinum Centurion card, and more importantly, something in the inner pocket that nobody outside his family had ever seen, and that mattered to him in a way that money hadn't mattered to him in years. He took it and stared at her. "Why?" he said. Just that. She shook her head. And she left. He stood in his own lobby holding the thing she'd just handed him for the second time, and understood for the first time that he was going to need to find out who she was 4 months earlier. This is where it really starts. Adaize Obi arrived in Birmingham from Lagos in 2009 with 2 suitcases, her mother's Bible, a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Lagos, and a work authorization through a skills visa program that had since been discontinued, which was one of many ways the immigration system communicated to people that its relationship with them was transactional and its terms were subject to change. She was 31 years old. She had designed 2 residential developments in Lagos before political instability and a family crisis. Her mother's cancer diagnosis, the cost of treatment, the mathematics of what the cost of treatment required, had brought her to the United States, where an aunt in Birmingham had offered a room and a connection to a cleaning company that serviced commercial buildings downtown. She took it because her mother was alive, and the treatment was working, and the bills were real, and the room was available, and because Adaize Obi had learned, growing up in a household managed by a woman who had kept 4 children fed and educated through 2 economic contractions and a husband's early death, that pride is a luxury, and your mother's life is not. She cleaned buildings. She was good at it, not in the way that turns cleaning into a metaphor, but in the literal, physical way of someone with an engineer's eye for systems and efficiency. Someone who looked at a building's square footage and its cleaning requirements the way she'd once looked at load-bearing walls and drainage gradients, and found the pattern that minimized time while maximizing result. Her supervisor at the cleaning company, a woman named Patricia, who had managed commercial accounts for 20 years, had put Adaize on the Vance Group building within 3 months of her start date. Because Adaize was the only person on her team who could be trusted to manage the 41st floor executive suite without supervision. That was how she came to know Theodore Vance's habits, not through any particular intimacy. He barely registered her existence, in the way that people who work in a building often don't register the people who clean it. She knew that he arrived at 6:45 most mornings and left between 7:30 and 8:30 in the evening. She knew he kept his desk cleaner than anyone else on the executive floor, which she had always noted as a telling detail in a person. She knew that on Thursday mornings he brought in a brown paper bag from a diner 2 blocks away and ate breakfast alone in his office before the day started. She knew his habits the way people know the habits of someone they observe without being observed themselves. She had never expected to know anything else about him. Then came the Friday morning in October. She found the wallet at 6:52. Between the brass elevator doors and the entrance to the security desk, tucked against the baseboard where the granite floor met the wall, the specific spot where something falls from a pocket when a person turns quickly, which was the corner Theodore Vance always turned on his way to the garage elevators. Thick, dark brown ostrich leather that caught the light differently from cowhide. Heavy with the specific weight of something that contained more than just cards. She picked it up. She opened it, not from curiosity, but from the practical necessity of identifying whose it was. Driver's license, first panel. Theodore Vance. Address in Mountain Brook. Cash in the side pocket, 12 banded hundreds and a loose 20. Cards behind a platinum divider, the Centurion, 2 corporate visas, a black card she didn't recognize, and in the inner pocket, the thing she wasn't expecting. A photograph. Small, worn at the edges in the way of a photo carried for a long time. A woman and a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing in front of what looked like a modest house with a red door. The woman was laughing. The boy was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her. Adeze looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she closed the wallet. She went to the security desk. The guard, a man named Darius, who worked the overnight into morning shift and knew Adeze well enough to know she was the most reliable person in the building, confirmed that Mr. Vance had come through about 20 minutes earlier and gone to the executive garage. He's probably already on his way to Tuscaloosa, Darius said. Site visit today. She looked at the wallet, $12,000 in cash. A photo that had been carried until the edges went soft. I'll leave it with you, she said. Or, Darius said, and he said it carefully. The way he said things when he was being careful. I could call up to his assistant right now. She comes in at 7. You could give it to her directly. Adeze considered this for a moment. Call her, she said. The assistant, a woman named Gwen, who arrived at 7 sharp and had the brisk, organized energy of someone for whom efficiency was a form of self-expression, came down in 3 minutes. She took the wallet. She looked at Adeze with the particular expression of someone assessing a situation quickly and accurately. She said, "Thank you." She started to say something else and then seemed to decide against it. Adeze went back to the 41st floor and finished the executive suite. She didn't think about it again. It wasn't complicated. She'd found something that wasn't hers. She'd returned it. That was all. But here's what she didn't know. Theodore Vance had a habit, when he was distracted or under pressure, of patting his left jacket pocket. It was the pocket where the wallet lived. He did it on the drive to Tuscaloosa. He did it 4 times, the way a person checks a thing before the absence registers as absence. On the 5th check, 37 miles south of Birmingham on Interstate 65, the pocket was flat. His hands tightened on the wheel. He was back in the building by 10 that morning. Gwen met him in the lobby with the wallet. He took it, checked the cash, checked the cards, then opened the inner pocket and looked at the photograph, and whatever was in his face at that moment was something Gwen had worked for Theodore Vance for 9 years and had never seen before and did not feel it was her place to ask about. "Who brought it in?" he said. "Cleaning staff," Gwen said. Adeze Obi, she works the executive floor mornings. He looked at the photograph for 1 more second, closed the wallet, put it in his pocket. "Arrange a reward," he said. 5,000. Have accounting process it. Gwen nodded. She called accounting. Accounting generated a check for $5,000 to Adeze Obi and put it in the interoffice mail to Patricia, the cleaning company supervisor, who put it in an envelope for Adise. Adise returned the check. Not dramatically, there was no confrontation, no speech, no gesture. She gave it back to Patricia with a note that said, simply, "Not necessary. Please return to Mr. Vance with my thanks." Patricia stared at the note for a long time. Then she called Gwen. Gwen told Theodore Vance. Theodore Vance sat with this information for approximately 48 hours, during which he said nothing about it to anyone, and then the wallet fell out of his jacket pocket a second time. This time in the lobby, not the garage, on a Tuesday morning 6 weeks later, and Adise found it again at 6:58. She brought it to Gwen directly. Gwen called upstairs. Theodore Vance came down. That was the second meeting. That was when he offered her $10,000. She said no. She said, "It's your wallet, Mr. Vance. It belongs to you." And then she left. He found out everything about her within a week. Not from her, she hadn't told him anything, but from Gwen, who was thorough, and from Patricia, who was honest, and from the immigration records that his attorney could access with appropriate authorization, and from the civil engineering degree that the University of Lagos confirmed by email in 3 business days. Civil Engineering, University of Lagos. 2 completed residential developments before age 30, now cleaning his executive floor at 6:45 in the morning. Theodore Vance was 71 years old. He had built things his entire life. He understood, in his bones, what a person who was supposed to be building things and wasn't cost. Not the economy, not the abstract, but the person. What it did to a person. He knew because he had been, for a specific 18-month period in 1987, a man with skills and no outlet for them. When his first company collapsed, and he'd had to take a laborer's job on a construction crew while he rebuilt the capital to start again. He had never talked about those 18 months to anyone. Not to his board. Not to his children. Not to anyone except, once, to the woman in the photograph. His wife, Miriam, who had stood on the front porch of the house with the red door in Mountain Brook and laughed while their son looked at her. She had been dead for 4 years. He carried the photograph because she was in it. Because the photograph was from the year before his company collapsed. Before the 18 months. Before the rebuilding. It was from the year when he had been a man who hadn't yet lost anything. And he could look at it and remember what that felt like. And remember that she had believed he'd come back from the collapse before he believed it himself. He understood, the week after the second meeting, why Adise Obi had returned the wallet twice. He understood the cash. $5,000, $10,000. Money that would have mattered to a woman working 2 jobs to pay for her mother's treatment and her visa renewal, and the cost of building a life in a country that had made the terms complicated. He understood it the way he'd understood every dollar that passed through his hands in 1987, when every dollar was counted. She hadn't returned it for a reward. She'd returned it because it was the right thing to do. Full stop. Clean and uncomplicated. In a world where everything had a transaction built into it, she had done a thing without one. He had built a $4.1 billion company. He had not done many things without a transaction built in for a very long time. He wasn't sure when exactly that had changed. He wasn't sure the change had been a good one. He called Patricia. He asked when Adise Obi was next scheduled to work the executive floor. The third meeting was on a Thursday morning in December. He was in his office when she arrived at the 41st floor at 6:47. He had not staged it, had not arranged to be visible or positioned anything for effect. He was simply at his desk, where he was every morning at this hour, eating breakfast from the brown paper bag. When she came through the suite door with her cart, He looked up. "Miss Obi," he said, "do you have a few minutes?" She looked at him. Her expression was composed in the way it always was, not guarded, not performing ease, just settled. The expression of a woman who had learned, across a life that had required considerable steadiness, to begin from a place of level ground. "Yes," she said. She sat across from his desk. He pushed the brown paper bag to the side. He put his hands flat on the desk in the way he did when he was being direct. Gwen could have told you this. His whole team could have told you this. And he said, "I want to understand why you returned the wallet." Not the first time. The second time. After the check. Adeze was quiet for a moment. She considered the question with the care she gave things. "The wallet had a photograph in it," she said. "I saw it when I opened it to find your name." She paused. "Not the money. Not the cards. The photograph was the thing you'd want back. The rest was replaceable." He looked at her. $5,000 is not replaceable," he said. "Not from where you're standing." "No," she said. "It isn't." She met his eyes. "But I didn't find $5,000. I found a wallet with a photograph in it. They're not the same thing." He was quiet. "The woman in the photograph," she said. She stopped herself. She had not intended to go this far. But something in the quality of his attention, not the attention of a billionaire assessing a transaction, but the attention of a person actually listening, kept her going. She looked like someone who mattered very much. Theodore Vance's jaw tightened. Not in anger, the other kind. "She was my wife," he said. "She's been gone 4 years." Adeze nodded. "I lost my father when I was 14, she said. "My mother still has a photograph from before he was sick. She doesn't keep it in a frame. She keeps it in her pocket." She paused. I recognized the wallet. The room was very quiet. Theodore Vance, who had not cried in front of another person since his wife's funeral, felt his eyes burn in a way that caught him entirely off guard. He looked at the brown paper bag on his desk, and then at his hands, and then at the woman sitting across from him who had found his wallet twice and returned it twice and explained it to him just now in 2 sentences that said everything. He breathed. "I want to know about your engineering degree," he said. She blinked. "My University of Lagos. Civil engineering. 2 residential developments." He paused. "Gwen told me. I asked her to find out." Something shifted in Adeze's face. Not distress, the opposite. A kind of wary, wondering recognition. "That was a long time ago." "What happened?" she told him. The condensed version, her mother's illness, the visa, the years of rebuilding, the mathematics of what surviving costs when you're doing it in a foreign country on unfamiliar terms. She told it without self-pity, in the factual tone of someone describing a situation that required navigation rather than mourning. He listened to all of it. Then he said, "I had 18 months in 1987 when everything I'd built collapsed, and I worked on a construction crew while I figured out how to start again." He looked at her. "I didn't tell many people that." She looked back at him. "Why are you telling me?" "Because you returned the wallet," he said. "Twice, without a reason I could calculate." He paused. "I haven't met many people I couldn't calculate." Adeze was quiet for a moment. "I didn't return it to impress you." "I know," he said. "That's the point." He reached into his desk drawer. He put a business card on the desk between them. It had a name on it that wasn't his. A woman named Sandra Cho, whose title was Director of Community Development Programs at the Vance Group Foundation. "My company has an engineering apprenticeship program for skilled professionals rebuilding careers after immigration gaps," he said. "Sandra runs it. It takes about 18 months. He looked at her. "It pays during the training." It leads to a licensed engineering role in our construction division. He paused. If you're interested. Adese looked at the card, at his face, at the brown paper bag and the office and the window behind him with the Birmingham skyline coming up pale gold in the December morning light. She thought about her mother, whose photograph lived in a pocket, about the 2 buildings she'd designed in Lagos before everything changed, about the 18 months he'd described, the ones that had led here, to this office, to the company that bore his name. She thought about the wallet, about what she'd seen when she opened it, about the fact that she'd known, without thinking, that the photograph was the thing that mattered. Some things, you just know. Yes, she said. I'm interested. 18 months later, Adese Obi passed the Alabama Professional Engineering Licensure examination on her first attempt. The score placed her in the 91st percentile of all examinees that sitting. She joined the Vance Group's construction division as a structural engineer. Her first project was a mixed-use residential development in Ensley, a neighborhood in Birmingham's West Side that had been waiting for quality construction investment for the better part of 2 decades. The project's pro forma had been sitting in the company's development pipeline for 3 years without a champion, partly because the margins were tighter than the company's usual threshold, and partly because the neighborhood wasn't the kind of neighborhood that appeared on the company's usual radar. Adese had asked about it in her 4th month of the apprenticeship. She had presented a revised pro forma to Sandra Cho in month 6. Sandra had taken it to Theodore Vance. Theodore Vance had read it in a single sitting, called Sandra, and said 2 words. Move it. The Ensley project broke ground 14 months after that 3rd meeting in December. Adese was on site the first morning. Hard hat, steel-toed boots, clipboard with the load calculations she had spent 6 weeks refining. She walked the site the way she'd once walked construction sites in Lagos, with the attention of someone who understood that the difference between a building that lasted and one that didn't lived in the details that nobody looked at until something went wrong. Everything held. Everything was calculated. Everything was right. Her mother came to visit that spring. Adese took her to the Ensley site on a Saturday morning. The building was framed by then, rising from the lot in the specific, impossible-looking way of new construction, all exposed steel and potential. Her mother stood on the sidewalk and looked at what her daughter had built and said nothing for a long time. Then, she put her hand in her pocket. She took out the photograph she always carried. The one from before her husband was sick, the one from the year when everything was still possible and she hadn't yet learned how much of it would have to be rebuilt. She looked at it. She looked at the building. She put it back in her pocket. Some things you carry. Some things you build. The best life contains both, the pocket and the building, the photograph and the steel frame going up against the morning sky, the thing you hold close, and the thing you raise so high anyone passing can see it. Theodore Vance drove through Ensley on a Tuesday afternoon and saw the building from the street. He stopped. He sat in the car for a moment with the engine running. Then, he reached into his jacket pocket, left side where the wallet always lived, and felt the familiar weight of it. He had not lost it again since December. Some things, once you understand their value, you stop losing.